Hi.
Hi.
So, do you pay for your Zoom?
No, I don't. I don't.
Uh, so that might be why it gives you 40 minutes. Because I pay
Yeah.
for my Zoom and I can talk as long as I want.
Right. Yeah, I've been thinking about doing that because yeah, it's kind of an interruption to the conversation or
Right.
the episode, of course.
Right.
But yeah.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I've been excited for today. I've been thinking about what we were talking yesterday. So, what about
Okay.
you?
It's been a good day. I talked to Phoebe some when I took Violet. My dog. Took her to the dog park, so I talked to Phoebe a bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that was good.
that's good. Yeah. Where's where's the dog park?
There are two. One is just like not even maybe not even a half a mile, maybe
Mm.
a third of a mile from here. But there's
Right.
another one at the airport. It's
Oh,
not the Santa Monica airport, and that's not
yeah.
too far away.
Okay. Yeah. How many airports is there in Santa Monica? I couldn't know.
There's just
Hmm.
one,
Oh,
but
okay.
it's they're getting rid of it. It's
Right.
the it is the airport where Charles Lindbergh, it was the first person to fly around the world, Charles Lindbergh. That's where he started
Oh,
and ended at, was at the Santa Monica airport. It's small. It's not, it's for like um, aviation enthusiasts and, small planes.
uh-huh.
It's not, and there's a limited amount of time that you can operate each
Right.
day. And I think only certain days of the week, and they're getting rid of it in the next 4 years. It won't exist anymore.
Right. Do you know what flight that was? Because that makes me think of that my mom once when I was a small kid would drive me beside this flight, and I don't know if that was like if she was talking about the first man or if it was someone from Denmark. Maybe it might have been. Do you know what flight that was?
What flight?
Yeah, like yeah.
This is in Denmark?
Yeah, it was. It wasn't
Yeah,
as loud, so I don't know if that's not at all connected.
I don't know. What year was this?
Um, at least 14 or not 14, 40 to 50 years ago.
Oh, okay, okay,
I
right.
don't know if that's yeah.
Yeah, this was in the 30s.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see. Yeah.
I could look it up. So what would you like to talk about today?
Well, I that's a really good question. I don't know, I'm really curious about sports and also your process with like writing. Yeah, it's
Okay.
some it's I'm really curious about, and yeah, I don't know, I'm also nervous. Right.
Why is that?
Um, because I don't know, I think there's a lot for me. Um, that's that it means a lot to me in some like special way because I've never like had someone on the podcast that's so like because it's kind of like Phoebe is my first girlfriend, and then having her dad on the podcast, but
Okay.
also the fact that I lost my dad, my own dad 6 years ago. So it's
Oh,
yeah, yeah, it feels big in some way, but also yeah, very relaxed.
okay.
Yeah,
Well, let's just go wherever you want to go.
yeah. Well, what are you looking mostly forward to about the Olympics? Like the Olympics games here in this year, 2024. We were
Right,
talking about that yesterday.
right.
Yeah.
So is it in Paris?
Yeah, it's Paris.
Right.
Yeah. It's
How long
yeah.
does it take you to get to Paris?
It takes 4 hours. Yeah, 4 hours. It does. I've never actually been to
Is that
Paris.
by train?
That's with the fly. With
Hmm.
flying. Yeah.
You could go there by train, no?
Yeah. Yeah, I could. I could. It's it's
It
a
takes 4 hours to fly from Denmark to Paris.
yeah, 4 or 5, I think. Does that seem like a lot of
That seems like a very long. I don't know what the distance is, but that seems like a very long flight for the
oh,
distance.
okay.
Um, but anyway, I could look that up. Um, and you're near Copenhagen, or
Yeah. Yeah, I guess there's the kind of the same. Yeah, Copenhagen would
yes.
be the place.
Yeah, it
Has to
looks like
be
it's about a two
Copenhagen.
hour flight.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That sounds more right than what I
Yeah.
was saying. Yeah. 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 It's really not that long.
Yeah, don't just let's just chat it up.
Have you been to Paris?
I have been to Paris.
Yeah. When?
Um, Phoebe's mother and I went to Paris in 99, December of
Mm.
99, so not too soon before the millennium.
Yeah.
And then Phoebe, her brother and mother and I went in 2010. And then Phoebe did an art program, which you probably know about. She did that in 2018. She was there the summer of 2018 in Paris. So those 3 times.
Oh, right. What what was the most cultural difference, if there were any, for you when you were there the first time and the second time?
Good
If there
for
is.
me.
Yeah.
Um, well, when I first went to Paris,
Like
I was
what
living,
did you experience there? Yeah.
right. When I first went to Paris, I was living in Denver, and
Right.
that was at the end of the 90s. So Paris seemed pretty fantastic.
Mm.
But then we lived in LA for 10 years before I went back the next time, and I discovered that after living in LA and having a better handle on what it is to be in a big city,
Mm.
Paris didn't seem as daunting and made a little bit more sense.
Mm.
But as a runner, to tie this in with running, running in those big cities for me is not easy.
No.
And I've figured out that the best way to do it is to run to whatever river is in town
Mm.
and then run down the river as far as I need to run and then turn
Yeah.
around. So I've gotten a pretty good handle on uh, the Seine River, the Thames River, the Arno in Florence, and then what's in Rome, the Tiber River.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Uh,
Ah,
but
that's
running on
sounds
cobblestones, when you
lovely.
come across those cobblestones, and if you're on a long run and you're kind of bouncing on them, after a while, you're
Mhm.
like, it's too
Yeah.
much.
Isn't it hard too? You'll probably need some like great shoes for that too, don't you? Like for the
Um,
knees.
um, so I'm asking this,
Yeah.
are we talking to an audience right now?
Well, I'm recording, yeah, right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
So
yeah.
what would be
Yeah.
helpful to talk about for the audience?
Um,
Should I introduce myself?
yeah, yeah, do that. Yeah.
Okay, so
Thank you.
I'm a therapist in California, Los Angeles, California. I live in Santa Monica. Uh,
Mm,
as we've discussed, we have a mutual acquaintance, which is my daughter.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I uh,
yeah.
I also have been to seminary, and so I work with a lot of people in religious communities,
Mm,
sort of unpacking their religious beliefs to help them come to a an understanding of God that works
Mm.
better for them,
Mm.
which may mean coming to
Very interesting.
becoming atheist, perhaps, or
Mm.
just spiritual or existentialist, or whatever it may be,
Uh-huh.
or deeper into their Christian roots or Jewish roots, or accessing Buddhism. So
Yeah.
that and addiction and these sort of existential topics, uh,
Mm.
are very related, because the addict is working on not using maladaptive coping mechanisms, which include substances,
Mm.
to navigate uncertainty, but learning some other tools, community,
Mm.
and a spiritual practice that allows them to embrace uncertainty and the unknown
Mm.
in more of a place of trust,
Yeah.
instead of a fight, flight, freeze response that is often medicated with drugs, alcohol, sex, food, you name it.
Right.
So I'm introducing myself. That's
Yeah,
the
thanks.
world that interests me. And then we were talking some about athletics.
Yeah.
I competed in high school and then college,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
University of
okay.
California at Santa Barbara. I'm a distance runner.
Right.
And I kind of, I've always run, but I stopped really putting in miles and racing until I was 44. And
Okay.
then I'm now 53, and I will be running my 11th marathon in 10 years on Boston Marathon. I'm running that in a month from today,
Mm.
or 4 weeks from today, in fact. And
Mm.
so you seem to be very interested in athletics. I don't know if that's
I
something
am.
you, I mean,
Yeah.
not that I'm like some super, athlete. I'm not, but I've definitely spent a lot of time
Mm.
running and swimming and backpacking and thinking about what it means to be an
Mm.
athlete and what it means to keep your head
Right.
straight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually think that's just that you like mentioned that kind of I mean, thank you for introducing yourself
Sure.
too. I kind of forgot that, but it's nice to also, yeah, take the time to dial in
Yeah, of course.
in that way. And yeah, I think something that comes up for me now is um how sports and how running and that dialing in helps you in the process of your work, but also in the process of writing a book of that, like because it's a really the just the topic that you're writing about and working on is so sensitive. Um,
Mhm. So the book quickly
yeah,
is, um, I
yeah,
just
yeah,
put
the
out a
book.
book that's called Faith and Sex.
Yeah.
And how to summarize the book. Simply put, it's called Faith and Sex Toward a Better Understanding of Recovery, Being, Relationship, and God.
Mm,
And essentially what it is a book that allows people who are trying to uh, get better, especially in regards to their sexual behavior, or
mm,
are just trying to understand their sexuality. And I don't mean sexual orientation, I mean like sexual
yeah.
desire
Right.
within religious communities that have a lot of prohibitions or laws, or
Mm.
um, behavioral expectations around
Mm.
sex. and
Right.
and yeah, the book is also, uh,
Mm.
it's been useful for people even who aren't dealing with sexual issues, because I do address and talk a lot about neurobiology,
Mm.
and also uh, faith and
Yeah.
religion, which we're all dealing with our very primitive fight, flight, freeze responses. and how we can manage. Well, first be conscious of this very unconscious process, fight,
Mm.
flight, freeze, right? The,
Mm-hmm.
the mind wants you to react. It doesn't want you to think about whether or not the snake is colored a certain way or has a pretty face. It wants you to get the hell out of the way because you're about to get bit.
Right.
And I just use that as an example.
Uh-huh.
And then um, a lot of our, I wouldn't say a lot, I would say our psychological experience is really rooted in whether our environments feel safe
Mm.
or feel unsafe.
Mm.
And if they feel unsafe, even though they may be safe,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is a lack of perception. Um, we will go into fight, flight, freeze responses, even though it's not appropriate for the setting.
Mm.
And
Okay.
I can go further into that. There's a lot of stuff I could talk
Yeah.
about here. So,
Can you say that again?
right. So I'll say it this way. And this
Yeah.
is something that's been really exciting for me as I've unpacked this and learned about it, is
Uh-huh.
that um, we have two memory systems within our brain. One
Yeah.
is the implicit memory system, which is really our felt experience of the world, what feels safe. And that's seated in our midbrain down here. It's like fight, flight, freeze, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis. And
Oh.
these are all connected to our brain stem. And it's how does the world, have you heard of the amygdala?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So that's the part of
Mhm.
the brain that sort of
Yeah.
integrates emotion with our senses.
Mm-hmm.
So just
Yeah.
like animals, right? Like mammals. I mean, this is the mammal, even lizard part of the lizard slash mammal part of the brain, which is, do I perceive danger in my environment based on smell,
Mm.
based on touch, based on sight? These are very quick, primitive responses that you imagine any animal having, right? Like a dog you see will stop all of a sudden in the woods, stick his or her nose in the air, and start smelling something. Or maybe they'll get spooked because they
Uh-huh.
perceive thunder in the distance or whatever it is, and they get spooked and they go into that fight, flight, freeze response. And we're
Mm-hmm.
like, what the hell's going on?
Right.
That's our implicit memory system. And that starts developing really pretty much at conception. And it's also genetically based. I
Mm.
could start. Do you just want me to keep rambling? Because I
Yeah.
can keep.
Yeah. It's really interesting to me.
Right. So when you think about it, our
Fascinating.
genetics is really passing on adaptations
Mm.
that
Yeah.
generations before us have proved useful for their survival.
Right.
So some of us may at conception be wired more sensitively for danger because generationally we've experienced war, our people have
Uh-huh.
experienced war or famine
Yeah.
or you name it. So we kind
Mm.
of come out a little bit more high strung, perhaps.
Right.
And then, so this implicit memory system, which is brainstem, so the brain of all, it develops first like brainstem and it moves up midbrain and it moves right hemisphere first
Mm.
before it moves left hemisphere. And then your prefrontal cortex doesn't finish developing until you're in your early 20s.
Mm.
So it's all of this implicit memory, felt memory develops first. So
Mm.
within the first certainly 5 years of your life, based on genetics and also your experience with caregivers,
Right.
reaches sort of a baseline of what feels safe.
Mm.
And depending on what your environment was like,
Yeah.
we carry that implicit memory around with us, even though flash forward 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, you're not in the same environment anymore. Yet you keep reacting to your
Yeah.
environments as if
Mm.
they were for me, I was born in 1970,
Mm.
as if it's 1975, and it's not 1975. So your explicit memory
Right.
is more
Yeah.
like sort of neocortex, left hemisphere, not hypothalamus, hippocampus,
Mm.
seat of
Yeah.
memory, that's more like, oh, I
Mhm.
went to the bank on Tuesday and I was at the
Mm.
bank and I remember taking out $20. That's
Right.
explicit memory.
Okay.
And if those two parts of our memory system aren't integrated, that's when problems start. Because then we're just responding
Oh.
fight, flight, freeze intuitively to something like, and then your friends might be like, I don't know what the hell's up with Steve, man. All of a sudden, like we were
Mm.
just going to a sporting event. He just started like yelling at the guy next to us, and then he punched me in the stomach.
Mm.
What the hell? Why did he do that? Well, I may have done that because I don't like crowds.
Mm.
When I was younger, I'm just making up the story here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Crowds make me frightened.
Mm.
I was little. I got caught in a crowd with a bunch of, with my family. I got separated from my parents. It was a very traumatic. This is about trauma, what I'm talking about, whether it's
Mm.
a capital
Yeah.
T or a lowercase t.
Yeah. That's
Capital
really
T is like
interesting.
war.
Like the
We
difference.
all experience lowercase trauma, which is really um, that implicit memory system getting wired
Uh-huh.
for that problem and responding to that problem, whatever it is, an older brother is a pain in the ass, or
Mm.
that neighbor who sometimes snaps you with a rubber band,
Yeah.
right? It's preparing you and it's really burning in your memory system. That neighbor who does that smells like this and often
Mhm.
comes over and rings the doorbell, and all of those associations with these things in your implicit memory get
Yeah.
your fight, flight, freeze response going immediately.
Mm.
Even though, a doorbell 20 years from now, maybe that neighbor who snapped you with the rubber band is dead, but you
Yeah.
hear that kind of a doorbell and you're triggered.
Mm. Yeah.
Okay, so that was a long way of me
Uh-huh.
talking about what interests me about, our emotional experience,
Mm.
and really what we are all working on in
Mm.
getting better. And this ties
Mm.
in with athletics, if you want.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
can slow down and see where you are here, because
Yeah. Go
I've
on.
it was
Taking some
only
notes.
it was only until later on in my life, because I used to think that I wasted a lot of time in my life running. Why
Right.
why didn't I
Huh.
learn how to play the piano? Why didn't I do something that was useful? But as a
Yeah.
therapist, it's recently, as I've learned more about the brain, I've realized that, oh my gosh, gaining emotional fitness is no different
Mm.
from gaining physical fitness.
Mm.
You're loading this when you're recovering from
Mm-hmm.
emotional
Uh-huh.
experiences, trauma. Really, what you're doing is getting rid of the substances, food, alcohol, sex. I mean, not food I mean, we need food. I meant like
Right.
acting out with Twinkies,
Mm.
alcohol, food, alcohol, drugs, sex in maladaptive ways. Once you
Yeah.
get rid of those, you have to feel these emotional circuits that you've been medicating. And then you have to figure out what your baseline is or what your threshold is. What can I
Mm.
tolerate?
Uh-huh.
And then you
Yeah.
bit by, like, even we started this podcast, you said you were a little nervous.
Yeah.
My sense is that even when you feel nervous, you choose to do it anyway,
Yeah. Yeah. I've
which
always
really
been like that.
what'd you say?
Yeah, I've always been like that. I'm like, I'm gonna do it because I know when I'm in it, and after that, I always, yeah, there's the
And
great
what you're doing is you are allowing yourself to strengthen
mm,
those emotional systems to gain more resiliency. And if
mm,
you can feel it, you can heal it. It's the
mm,
saying.
yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
like, oh, well, this is no different from distance running, where really you're trying to find your threshold, and you don't want to push yourself too much, because then you end up going back into, with distance running anyway, you overload your system, you put yourself into a hole,
Uh-huh.
metaphorically, right? And
Right.
then you
Yeah.
have to so you need to find that spot where you're healthfully stressing the system, but not overstressing it,
Mm,
not only on the given day, but
Mm-hmm.
also in a training schedule of a week, which there are rest days and effort days, and then within a season, and then within a career. And if you can see
Mm-hmm.
your emotional experience that way and understand what you're
Mm-hmm.
working on, you can go
Yeah.
like, today I need to kick myself out the door.
Right.
It
Yeah.
feels cold and it feels miserable that I have to go give this speech, but I know that tomorrow I can just detox. I can just go on a walk, right? Or whatever. But I will gain
Mm-hmm.
resiliency if I do these things. But of
Yeah.
course, it's not going to help you if, say, you're afraid of public speaking and
Mm.
you force yourself to speak five
Right.
times a day for, I mean, it
Yeah,
may or
no,
may not
and
be, but you
yeah.
could end up overwhelming yourself such that you make your problem worse.
Mm. Right.
So I'll
Yeah.
slow myself down. You get me excited about these topics, I should say.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's something I've been really more and more curious about and fascinated by because it's always been really it's always like emotional intelligence, I guess, and physiology. Just because we've never really been taught about it in school, but it's
Hmm.
always something that's for me been interesting because of soccer and because of strength training.
Hmm.
And then when I lost my dad and got into therapy and had these conversations, and then later on after high school, I chose to take on therapy again because I was kind of I don't know what it's if it's just like a buildup, I guess. But there's this curiousness about how it connects the what we've just talked about, how training your emotional strengthening and your resilience
Hmm.
helps you with the physical as well. And
Or that they're not just handy metaphors.
right.
They are similar physiological and biological processes because they're
Mm,
cells. And you're
right.
building, just as with muscles,
Hmm.
you're
Yeah.
trying to build more sort of integrated connectivity between cells and
Mm,
fibers, right?
yeah.
You're trying to do the same thing with your emotional circuits.
Right.
And the brain is pruning neurons that it doesn't need, and then
Mm,
strengthening neural connections that it does need, but it only knows what it needs and doesn't need if you stop using that which it doesn't need
uh-huh.
and start
Oh,
using what
yeah.
it needs, right?
Hmm. Right.
And this is why drugs, alcohol, and certain compulsive behaviors are maladaptive, is they're just really a crutch
Yeah. Okay.
when your more adaptive neural responses can't take it.
Mm.
I say adaptive meaning those, you're more uh, trying to find the word, the more
Right.
inherent or endogenous neural circuits
Uh,
can't take enough of the stress
right.
because they're not strong enough yet. So
Right.
you pull in like drugs, alcohol, acting out to calm yourself instead of having more inherent resiliency to calm yourself because you've made those neural connections that
Right.
allow you to do that.
Right.
And so, it's the analog to, or the comparison, or the word I'm looking for, it's
Yeah.
directly related with to. And what fascinates me about this is that a lot of people, can I just keep rambling?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's me.
a lot of people who seem rather perplexed about mental health and recovery from just being human,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Okay.
is that many people have skills that they've learned. They can play the piano, or they're really good cooks, or they're athletes,
Mm.
yet yet they don't realize that the tools that, or the processes that they went through to gain this muscle memory
Mm.
and skill level at these various tasks is very similar to what you need to do to get 10 minutes what you need
Mm.
to do when you're strengthening your emotional circuits. It's just that they don't
Yeah.
know what they're working on. And they don't know what they're working on emotionally because by very definition, your fight, flight, freeze response system is unconscious.
Mm. Yeah, that's something that I find so fascinating how I don't know that we don't have more depth, I guess, in society about how this unconscious process actually evolves something in us, but it's like we're kind of I guess that's why I started the podcast to kind of get in depth with some of these things, or at least
Mhm,
try, um, and get curious about myself and others and how, yeah, that connects. Because I don't know, I've just grown up in a family where everything's very focused on what's in the news and kind of all of these headlines and stuff. And I've always been very, very curious about like what's underneath that, what's
mhm,
underneath the surface of
mhm,
that. And
mhm,
so to been curious about how do I myself work with that with myself.
mhm.
And so I think it's really interesting. And yeah, the also now it's something totally not totally different, but um faith is something that I have always found really I don't know, there's always been something for me about it, but it's also been kind of really scary.
You're saying faith.
Yeah, faith.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but like, yeah, um, I don't know, I just got that just came up to me maybe because I don't know. Anyways,
Do you want to talk about that or no?
yeah, I get yeah, maybe yeah. Well, I'm just thinking about if we have 10 minutes if we have time. And I guess we can do that. We can do that.
You'll send me another link.
It's the same link, so we can just
Okay.
jump on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, faith, I think. Yeah. If you want to share a bit about that.
What would you like to talk about in that regard?
Um,
I mean,
I
I know where
guess,
I could go if you want me to.
yeah. If you're if you haven't heard about faith before, I think I would start there just to have a baseline for myself
Okay.
and for
Well,
those who
because this is
listen.
your podcast, then I feel the freedom to be as out there as I want to be.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, just go on.
So
Okay.
there are lots of
Oh,
ways of approaching the unknown, as we probably all know.
yeah.
Um, and lots of religions and conceptions of the unknown,
Mm-hmm.
God. What I find, what channel or path that I've been finding most interesting lately, and where
Yeah.
I really locate myself theologically, is
Mm.
what is called process theology.
Mm-hmm.
And have you heard of process theology?
I think no, but I think Phoebe has mentioned it.
Right.
Yeah.
That, or another term is emergent theology. And really, as I've read more, so Alfred North Whitehead was a British philosopher during the
Mm.
20s,
Okay.
and he wrote a sort of a seminal text called Process and Reality. And really,
Mm.
what it is, in my view, is a way of embracing theory of relativity and bringing it to theology. And I can explain what I'm talking about quite simply. So we were just talking about, I'm watching time and we may have to
Yeah.
like pick this
Good.
back up in 5 minutes, but
Yeah. Good.
um, we're talking about the ways in which connectivity is a basic reality of existence. And we've talked about even
Mm.
in neurons. I was just talking about neurons, and we were talking about the muscles in the body, and that when our muscle fibers are more integrated,
Mm-hmm.
and if our muscles are well integrated with, our skeletal system, with our organs, right, we function better. There's a real fluidity of form.
Mm.
And the same is true of our emotional circuits,
Right.
that the more that the neurons are integrated and there are fewer, I guess I'm going off a little bit here,
Mm.
fewer uh, splits or compartmentalization of
Right.
experience. So really that's what trauma is the young mind not being able to tolerate the emotional experience and then
Mm.
splitting it off.
Mm. Right.
Dys,
Right.
integrating the experience because it's too
Mm.
much to deal with. And
Mm.
really what happens when you're in a therapy room is
Right.
the ability to talk about very difficult experiences that maybe you haven't
Yeah.
talked about with others so that you can, I said, if you can feel it, you can heal it. Really, what you're
Mm.
doing is integrating those experiences and integrating the emotion of those experiences into
Mm.
the present day. And
Right.
that's,
Yeah.
that when you cry and you're upset and it's overwhelming, hopefully, if you're in a safe place, what
Mm.
you're doing is that whole experience is a process of integrating split off difficult experiences and actually bringing them into your current experience and integrating them. And that's a neurobiological process of
Mm.
connectivity and sort of combing out these neurons, just as you would with your muscles if you're trying to gain fitness with your muscles. You're trying to
Right.
comb out and create better connectivity. Now, to tie this into theology,
Right.
process theology focuses
Right. Right.
on, and this even gets back to Hegel, which I won't go,
Hegel?
well, Hegel, and
Mm.
if I won't go off
Right.
on Kierkegaard, but Kierkegaard's got a
Oh
connection
yeah.
to Hegel. But the understanding that things are connected, minds are connected,
Mm-hmm.
like the
Yeah.
mind doesn't exist in my cranium. My mind exists in our interaction with each other. This
Mm.
conversation produces something bigger, something that
Mm.
emerges from our experience, something bigger than what
Mm.
we would create for ourselves in isolation. Humans are
Right.
built for connectivity.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
process theology focuses on this basic principle of existence, which is connectivity. And
Mm.
what if God's action in the world is this collective connect? God feels us. There's a term for this, panentheism.
Mm-hmm.
God feels us and we feel God. And there's a connectivity within this, and that God is working all things toward integration. And largely what we need to do is trust that integrative process that's existing in
Mm.
the universe
Right.
and work with it. And sometimes
Mm.
we end up being in knotty, knotty, um, sort of difficult places where things are
Right.
just not integrated.
Right.
Well, we can live in fight, flight, fear response to that, or we can trust that this is a difficult moment that we're
Mm.
going to flow through and something is going to come out on the other end.
Mm.
Something better and stronger and more resilient is going to
Mm.
emerge from this process. We just need to trust it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's faith.
That's the
A
faith.
different
Yeah.
view of faith. It's not a faith based on proper behavior.
Uh-huh.
It's a faith based on trust that God is working all things towards something better. And we just have
Mm.
to, and we can get more into what's called theodicy in a moment. Theodicy is
Yeah.
essentially the theology of evil.
Oh.
Either God can intervene and doesn't, or God can't.
Right.
And if God, and you're
Oh.
screwed either way. Either God is could make things better and doesn't, or God can and just doesn't. Oh, I just said that.
Uh-huh.
God can but doesn't, or God can't. But if God can't, then you're like, well, then God's not more powerful than all of these problems. So you're kind of
Right.
screwed either way. And that's a theodicy discussion. And I think process theology really addresses theodicy, which we could get into next in
Right.
I think a
Yeah.
rather encouraging and hopeful way.
Yeah. This is